So, Trevor, this last part that we're going to do is we're going to look at some areas of concern and some reasons to be optimistic about whether or not they can improve in those areas we discussed and become a defense that gets even better. Again, if Notre Dame simply stays where they are now the rest of the year, they're going to have a legit top 10 defense. No question about it in my mind. This is going to be a very, very good defense. However, there is room for improvement. And again, improving isn't always saying you're not good at something. It's like if you're really good, Michael Jordan was always a great player, but as he got older, he improved certain parts of his game. His game evolved. He wasn't become more great, less. He was always great. There's just different type of greatness. So just you understand, this defense is really good. It's one of the 10 best defenses in college football. That's not debatable in my opinion. But can they be top 5? Can they be top 3? Can they really take that level where they're so dominant that then it you just put teams away. Now if your offense gets any better, now you've become that sort of, okay, now you're getting back to being the team that we thought that they were. So we're going to talk about reasons that we're optimistic that they're going to get better, and then some areas of concern that could maybe keep them from getting to that level. So let's first, Trevor, begin with the reasons for optimism. And the reason for optimism for me, number one, is with all the injury issues that they've had, the good news is they are going to get a few guys back. Obviously, Christian Gray is going to be back after missing the one game he missed. He'll be fine. Josh Burnham, I think, played a couple plays against Louisville, and that was it. I was told he's fully healthy, but you know how it is when you have an ankle injury. Sometimes it can get really tight, and you run the risk of re-injuring it if it's really tight, and he couldn't get that ankle loose, and that's why he didn't play against Louisville. He'll be good to go coming back, which is huge because I don't expect Boubacar Traore to be back. And, we'll see how that plays out. Definitely not going to be back, at least for the first stretch, but I don't expect him back at all. We'll see how that goes. But because that injury looked bad and some things that I've heard about it. So we'll see. But getting Burnham back helps because you do have Junior Tilamaka playing well. I thought Logan Thomas flashed. And again, the thing about Junior and Logan is you're not going to face a better offense than Louisville's until if it's not the playoff, it won't be until you head out to LA. You're not going to face a better offense than the one you faced last week. And you were able to handle that without Christian Gray, without Boubacar for over a half, without Josh Burnham in that game, without Jack Kaiser for a half. Jack should be back. So you're going to get those guys back. You're going to get Josh Burnham back. And at some point in time, I don't know when it's going to be, but at some point in time, you're also going to get Gabriel Rubio back. And I think those guys kind of coming back are going to be nice boosts for this defense because Burnham being out, it's like this. I always have a tough time saying this because I think people take it the wrong way, or maybe I think they're going to take it the wrong way. They may understand it perfectly, and I'm paranoid about it. But when you talk about an injury and you say blessing or blessing in disguise, like, well, holding, you're saying it's a good thing. No, I'm not saying it's a good thing that Josh Burnham got injured. But Josh Burnham being out forced them to play Bryce Young more, where they were hardly playing him at all the first two games. And Bryce struggled initially. Not sure of what Bryce flashed against Purdue, but if you actually grade how he performed and you take out he's a freshman in his first meaningful snaps, you just grade him on how he played, he didn't play that well. A couple flashy plays, but, not taking great angles against the run, not quite finishing plays off and things like that. All those things factored into it, but he's gotten better each week. And when I'm watching Bryce against Louisville, I'm like, okay, we talked about this the other day, Trevor. This cat number 30 is going to be a problem for some teams in October, November. Yeah. I don't know that he gets that much action if Josh Burnham is down. So now my hope and and I thought RJ Oben wasn't great against Louisville, but it was certainly the best, most active game he's had at Notre Dame so far. If you can find a way to kind of get him to just be solid, now you're in a position where maybe you can do with Burnham what they were going to do with Boubacar before Botelho got hurt. Because when Burnham went down, they were playing Boubacar at big end and Viper in that game against Purdue. And then Botelho goes down, and now he had to become a full-time Viper. Well, now with Burnham, you can do him at both because Burnham was a Viper his first 2 years. You moved him to end this offseason. So now you could have RJ and Bryce at big end. You'd have Tuihalamaka and Logan Thomas at Viper. And now you got Josh Burnham, who I felt, along with Botelho, was your best edge player the first 2 games before his injury, can now kind of do a little bit of both wherever he's needed most. And then he can get a lot of snaps at those two positions, because I don't know if you necessarily want to ramp up Logan Thomas to 30 snaps a game right away. And so I think getting him back helps what is otherwise a pretty banged up group of defensive ends. So I think that's big. And then when you can throw in, if he's healthy and back to, the player he is, if you get a healthy version of Gabriel Rubio back, that's a huge boost to the inside of your defense. You want to talk about your run defense getting better? Put 97 back in the middle of that defense. I mean, just if that's the only change you make, is a boost for this defense in the second half of the season. There's no question about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And with the injury bug, it's unfortunate, and nobody ever wants to see a player go down, right? But to your point, that blessing in disguise conversation is more, sometimes you just don't know what you have until you need it. And sometimes you just have to find out how deep and how talented your team truly is by kind of throwing kids out into the fire a little bit and saying, hey, we need you now. We know in practice what we've seen you be capable of doing. But I think kids like Bryce Young and Logan Thomas are really good examples of what that looks like for Notre Dame. And sometimes when you're called upon, you either rise to the occasion or you kind of crumble under the pressure. And so far, a lot of the young guys on Notre Dame's defense that have gotten the opportunity to go out and play have played really well for the most part. So you compound the already gained experience that Bryce Young and Logan Thomas are getting as guys that are kind of having to grow up a little bit quicker than what we would have thought at the start of the season. And then you add in the veteran players that are going to be coming back and the veteran players that they still have that are healthy. I think the defensive line is actually at a relatively decent spot given the injuries that they have. Obviously, if Boubacar was still healthy and RJ Oben was producing a little higher and Gabriel Rubio didn't break his foot, that would be the ideal situation.
If Jordan Botoho was still right,
100%.
Exactly.
And obviously, that is the most ideal situation. But in years past, like we've alluded to, sometimes you lose guys like that, and the defense is just completely different, man. And this year, I think it speaks, and it's a testament to the recruiting job and the development job that you now just have, realistically, 12 to 13 guys in that entire defensive line room that can come in and contribute with, given injuries. And I think that's really exciting to see the direction that the program's heading in.
So getting those guys back is important, Trevor. And if the defensive line can play better, and a thing for me is another part of this, along with, I'm going to move one of the things we talked about up here, Trevor, because I think it fits better here in this conversation. If getting Burnham back and getting Rubio back, and then hopefully not having any more major injuries on the D line is important. But if that is countered with the three veterans, you talked about RJ Oben, but also Howard Cross and Riley Mills building on how they played against Louisville. And I don't know that either of them had like a vintage Howard Cross or vintage Riley Mills game. I thought they both played well. But if all they do the rest of the year is just that and not even get back to what they were at times last year, just that, the interior is going to be a lot better, in my opinion. Like a couple of the long runs, if you actually go back and look, one of the long runs, they had like a 20-yard run, was on a play where I looked over at Vince and I was like, they have their entire second string defensive line and linebackers on the field right now. And Louisville immediately, inside zone, went for 20. You know what I mean? It was like, so, and that's okay because those guys need to learn. And you're at a point now where you're so banged up, you don't really have a first or second team anymore.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And because at that time they were not second team. Remember in 22 when Al Goldman make mass substitutions, he put his entire second team defense on the field. They were quote unquote all second team in this game because they actually had a couple at that time starters, but because Boubacar had gone down and Kaiser had gone down, there's the quote unquote second teamers are now the starters. So you have no package where you're not having that. I just thought that was interesting. But if those two guys play better up the middle and more consistent, and RJ Oben is just solid, that's just be solid. That provides a huge boost along with getting Burnham and Rubio back. So even though the D line's been good this year, nowhere close to great. It's been okay. When I mean good, I mean just kind of solid, right? Below expectations, but if you take out expectations, it's been solid. Hasn't been great, hasn't been bad, it's just been solid. Getting those two kids back, and then the veterans kind of ascending and getting back to what we know they're capable of, because we've seen a bunch of it on film in the past. all of a sudden this defensive line starts getting better and better and better. And I'm hoping that we can see that in the second half of the year. That answers a lot of those, start better, have a better run defense, be more disruptive, limit big plays in the pass game, get the ball more. A chunk of that gets taken care of if those three guys just start playing better and more consistently, along with getting Burnham and Rubio back. So I think there's optimism for this D-line to get better that you normally wouldn't have for a group that has so many veteran players on it, if that makes sense.
I think the key word that you use there is consistency, right? I want to be having the consistency conversation around those true freshmen and redshirt freshmen and the sophomores that are getting in and rotating, because those are the guys that you would expect to see. They played really good this series. They played really good this half. They played really good this game, but it's been a little bit of this is something that you can expect. You don't expect that from 5th and 6th year guys.
Right.
So if Riley Mills and Howard Cross and RJ Oben and Jason Onye, who rotates in, and those guys who have the experience on defense, if those guys can start playing a little bit more like this and a lot less like this, while the younger kids continue to develop and ascend and hone in their skills and get more comfortable in the defense, I think this defensive line is going to start looking a lot like what we thought the expectation was going to be preseason. So it's all about continuing to develop the young guys and getting those older veterans just on a level playing field. If they have to, you hit the nail on the head perfectly. Just play the rest of the season like how you played against Louisville. You don't have to go be the best defensive lineman in the history of college football. You don't have to go Aaron Donald with the Rams in his prime every single game.
Don't even need Howard Cross to live up to his preseason expectations.
Right.
Honestly, a first team All-American, just do what you did against Louisville. Repeat that the rest of the way, and you're going to be okay.
100%.
You're going to be okay. Yeah. Kind of finishing this up too, Trevor, a couple other reasons for optimism for me is even if the D-line just keeps who they are and they don't get any better, I still expect the linebackers to get better. But I also think if the D-line gets better, then the linebackers are going to keep getting better because we've seen it. We've seen this group get better, and at times it's an incremental jump. At times it's been a big jump. But against Louisville, I started to see okay, you're really starting to see the impactability of this group. And in the previous games, okay, Kingston was really good in this game. Drake was really good in that game. Jaden Osborne was good in this other game. But there wasn't a game where all three of them were really playmakers together until Louisville. And that was the game where you're like, and again, they gave up some mistakes, but the mistakes are going to kind of slowly go down. They're still going to make them, but they're going to slowly go down. Then you started sending more of the playmaking ability. I honestly was like, okay, Kingston had 2 bad mistakes on Saturday. You live with that. Why? Because look at some of the plays he made. Drake Bowen had a couple missed run fits, although his misfits in the run game go down every single game. And I thought Drake was excellent against Louisville. But it's been a slow ascension, and at some point in time, they're just going to kind of explode, and I think the Louisville game was the beginning of that. But even if it's still a steady, slow ascension, they're going to get better and better and better and better as the season goes on. And I would even tap into the linebacker depth to help the Viper position. Yeah. I'd look over and sit down, and I'd have a sit down with Preston Zinner this bye week, and I'd say, hey, Preston, look, man, we think you can help us over here. What do you think about giving us a look? I hope that conversation's had. I don't know if it has or hasn't, but I hope that it has, because I think he can help you there. But between what we've seen from Drake Bowen, what we've seen from Kingston, what we've seen from Jaden Osbury, what I think Jack Kaiser can provide as he gets more snaps there, this linebacker position has a chance to get a lot better. Like last year, Kingston and Maris and JD and Jack, they were what they were, and it was really good, right? Mm-hmm. They were really good last year. But Jack, they were. I mean, they're fifth year seniors. They're kind of, yeah, that's who they are, and who they are was, and it was steady and it was good and it was fine. That's not what I'm saying is not a negative. They were good at the beginning of the year and they stayed good all year. You know what I mean? Like that's what we saw with this group. What I'm saying is there is an expectation that this group is going to keep getting better and better and better and better, because the talent is starting to shine more, because mentally they're starting to get more and more and more comfortable in the defense. And now with Kingston and Drake, especially because they've played even more snaps, there's a lot of film to show them the mistakes they're making and to help understand. And now Kingston has seen, okay, this is how teams try to manipulate me. And now I've seen it. and now I got to study it and be more prepared for it. Same thing with Drake. And so I just expect this group to get better and better and better. And by the time we get to November, bro, this is going to have a chance to be a really, really dynamic linebacking core. I'm not saying it's going to be one of the best in the country because they're still young, but just within the context of this defense, you're going to start seeing the plays ramp up big time. The sacks, like we saw from Kingston, the recovered fumbles because they're so athletic, they get to the ball a little bit faster. You know, like we saw Saturday, the big hits are starting to kind of get there. Like Drake's laid the wood a couple times, you know, the last couple weeks. You know what I mean? He's starting to bring some big hits. Kingston's starting to get more comfortable at the point of attack. Man, Jaden Alsbury's, I mean, he's starting to really play fast because he's getting more comfortable mentally with where he is. And man, that's exciting to think about. So that's another reason I'm optimistic, is because I think that group is going to only get better and better and better.
The linebacking core has been one of my favorite to watch, one of my favorite position groups to watch so far to start this year, because you were actively watching really three guys just continuously grow up week over week, and we get to watch that. Drake Bowen is going to be a lot of fun to watch. Him and Kingston both are just to finish out this year, leading into next. Don't want to get the cart too far in front of the horse here, but it's going to be so fun to watch them in a Notre Dame uniform for a couple of years, man, because it's, to your point, they have a lot more clarity with what they're doing. They're not, you start to see it. They're playing less of, oh, I can't make a mistake here, to now I'm more comfortable with what I'm doing. The athletic ability is starting to take over, and that is something really exciting to watch. So excited to see what this linebacking core looks like in November, to your point.
I feel the same way about the secondary, Trevor. I mean, we're looking at two of their better playmakers this year have been Adon Schuler and Christian Gray, and they're going to just keep getting better and better and better. And then Christian's injury on Saturday opened up a huge opportunity. His injury combined with Jaden Mickey quitting the team opened up a huge opportunity for Leonard Moore to get in. He tied for the team lead with 76 snaps on Saturday. And yeah, he gave up a couple plays, but that kid played really, really well in that game. And now he's going to get better. Now there's more confidence among the coaching staff to play him more. Now my hope is that because Leonard, I believe, spent a lot of the year playing in the boundary. My hope is that the performance he had on Saturday gives them the faith to say, hey, you're our number 3 corner. Well, instead of number 2 field or number 2 boundary, you're our number 3 corner, meaning you're going to spell Benjamin and you're going to spell Christian. Because I think if they can kind of have some of these games where Benjamin can get some time off, you're going to keep him fresher and fresher for November and in the postseason. Same thing with Christian. So the resurgence of Leonard Moore, I would activate Carson Hobbs and start getting him a little bit of time because he's flashes some athletic ability, see what he can do. The young secondary is there too. Kennedy Urlacher, is a guy that you could maybe be on the verge. Luke Talich is another young secondary player that plays a ton on special teams. It could maybe help out if there's a need there. Everything I said about the young linebackers, I'm saying about the young secondary. The difference is the secondary players haven't had as many of the mental mistakes as the linebackers. Now, that's not Mike Mickens is a better coach than Max Bulla. I think Mike Mickens is a better coach than just about anybody on the staff. Sure. It's more about one position requires a lot more of that, where cornerbacks complex, but it's kind of like, okay, you've got this guy in man coverage. There's no other, you know what I mean? There's no read. You've got that guy. But it also is a credit to the job that Mike Mickens has done. Just like I want to give a lot of credit to Max Bulla for the job he's done to keep getting his linebackers better and better and better every week. Yeah. Mike Mickens' ability to get young guys out there mixed with older guys and as a unit get them to play as well as they have is impressive. And I would even throw in, I know I said to young guys, but one thing that I got out of last Saturday's game that maybe we didn't talk enough about that could really be impactful the second half of the season. This was the most comfortable Rod Hurd looked at Notre Dame. Like, he actually looked like he knows what he's doing at safety now, where he hadn't in the first 4 games. That's a great sign, because remember, I know he's a 6th-year senior, but Rod Hurd was a nickel and had played corner at Northwestern. He still kind of knew at safety and wasn't here for the spring. So my hope, and again, this is a hope, not this is what's going to happen, because it could have just been he had one good game and then he go. But Rod Hurd, this was the best Rod Hurd had looked all season, in my opinion, by far. If you can get Rod Hurd going and he can start repeating what he did on Saturday, that's just another aspect. You're like, dude, this team can get a lot better. And with a lot of, Xavier, dude, just keep doing what you're doing. Benjamin Morrison, yeah, Benjamin could get better, but again, he's still really good, right? Somebody asked, like, are you disappointed in the season? No, I'm not disappointed in this season. Is he one of the 2 best corners right now? No, but he's still really good. Keep doing what you're doing. Maybe work out some of the rust, but just keep doing what you're doing. Christian Gray, keep doing what you're doing. Jordan Clark, just keep doing what you're doing. And then if Adon Schuler continues to get better, because he's had some MAs as well as a young safety. If Rod Hurd gets more comfortable, it's scary to think about the fact with Leonard Moore getting more time now and maybe Carson Hobbs getting more reps with the first-team defense as one of the number 2s. Dude, it's kind of scary to think about this, but this secondary can actually get a lot better over the second half of the season, which is nuts to think about when you consider how young they are, and those guys are going to keep getting better, and then Rod Hurd getting more and more comfortable in the defense. It's kind of fun to think about.
I think that's what gets me excited about this team as a whole overall. Bryan, you and I talked about it before the show started, about how this kind of feels almost like a quasi-NFL season with the extended playoff. And a lot of that conversation with NFL teams is who's getting hot in November. And based on the conversations that you and I had on the show on Tuesday and what we're talking about with the defense today, is there's a lot to be excited about. I know the Northern Illinois loss put a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths, understandably so, especially based on what the expectations were for this team preseason. But if you look at it, Notre Dame on offense and defense has played nowhere near what their ceiling is, and they're 4-1 with 2 top 25 wins right now. So there's a lot to build on and a lot to be excited about. Now, there are some things that raise questions, like we brought up today. There is that injury question. There is that question of, can the veterans start to play a little bit more consistent, and will those young guys continue to ascend? I wholeheartedly believe that they will. So I'm really excited to see what this is going to start to look like.
Let's finish off this conversation, Trevor, with just some of the concerns and the things that could keep them from getting there, because you kind of talked about it a little bit. Number one is we think the young players can get better, but sometimes younger players kind of hit a wall and they just kind of stagnate, or maybe have a couple games where they regress because they're just a little bit mentally fried, especially when you get into sort of, midterms and some different, where the academic piece ramps up. Young guys young guys tend to be more impacted by those type of changes to their schedule than veteran players. So there is a chance that the younger players, or some of them, kind of hit a little bit of a wall. That's a possibility, and we'd be foolish to ignore that is a possibility. I think that also when you look at the defensive end injuries, they're at the point now, and this is just kind of true overall, when you talk about what could keep them from getting there, it really comes down to the younger players hit that wall and just don't get better or regress a little bit. And then the second one is just injuries, especially defensive end. And they've lost Patelho to a season ender. I don't expect Boubacar back. There's obviously no official word from Notre Dame. I don't expect him back. But the depth it's amazing to see their ability to step in and guys go down and somebody else steps in and balls out. But they're kind of getting to that point where it's like, okay, enough is enough. We need us to chill for a little bit. We can't afford, looking at it from a coaching standpoint, yeah, we've weathered this storm, and you lose Christian Gray and you lose Jade Mickey and Leonard Moore steps up. Like, that can't be a permanent thing. You can't afford to continue to go down this path of guys dropping, because that is the thing where eventually it's going to limit who you are. If not in the regular season, at the very least, it could limit who you are when you get to the postseason, because now one of the strengths of your defense, depth, is no longer a strength, because you have to play Logan Thomas in 35 snaps now, as opposed to picking and choosing your moments. You have to play, this player now, because you've lost now 2 starters. Think about this. They're going to play the rest of the season with their 3rd Viper now as a starter if Boubacar doesn't come back. That's not an easy thing to deal with, Trevor, for anybody. And it speaks volumes to the point where we're not at the point yet where we're like, okay, they're screwed now. You know what I mean? There's a lot of teams. You totally lose your starting and your backup Viper, weak side end, which is supposed to be your best pass rusher, before you're done with the 5th game. You're screwed. Notre Dame's not, because they've got Junior Tuihalamaka, they've got Logan Thomas, they've got Josh Burnham, and there's even some things they could do if they wanted to with Bryce Young over there in certain packages. So it's amazing to think of the depth when of this defense when you consider that. So And I would even consider like, hey, maybe you need to get Brennan Vernon back outside and let him play some big end so you can then have more freedom to maybe do some of those other guys on the other side. But there's options, but you're getting to the point now where you can't lose much more, or you're going to have a tough you're going to have a tough time.
At some point, as much as we don't want to admit it, the well will run dry at some point. And I'm glad that Notre Dame is not there yet. Another thing that they could do too is Jalen Sneed has a lot of experience rushing off of the edge too. So that's another thing that they could dabble around in.
Nickel. Yeah, and we've seen him do that, but my concern is more of the base downs. Is more of my concern.
Yeah,
the base downs, because nickel they're actually not overly. Bubakar's really been the only like kind of big loss this last couple weeks from the nickel package.
Sure,
the rest of their nickel package is intact, and you mentioned Jalen Sneed, Kingston, and guys like that. So you are correct. You are correct.
And as far as the young guys go, the biggest thing here is on top of the academic piece and them being new to just the world of college and college football is kind of what we talked about Notre Dame as a whole after the Texas A&M week is how are you going to handle success? A lot of the young guys are coming on early. And I think a piece of them ascending as quickly as they did was they kind of had that mentality as a true freshman. I'm hungry. I want to do what I can to get on the field. They got their opportunity. They kind of got their moment in the spotlight. So it's going to be a little bit of how they handle success too, and how they handle, hopefully they still keep that mentality of I played well, a lot of areas to improve. So let's keep getting after it. So that'll be all stuff to watch for. Those are some of the things that could hinder Notre Dame's success on defense, but I think it's a lot of the trends are trending upward, and I'm excited to see where they're going to be at come November, because this could be a very, very, very dangerous defense. Not that they already aren't.
I mean, again, I think the Fermo Efficiency Index has them third. The ESPN Power Rankings has the defense fourth.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's like people see it. The numbers show it. The film shows it. This is really good. But that's the fun thing is they're not at their peak. They may not reach their peak for the reasons we discussed, but they're not at their peak. Before we get out of here and I bring Bill Bender on, we did have two quick super chats. One for my guy, Anthony Solomon. Thanks for the show, gentlemen. Thank you, Anthony, for being with us, but then, of course, also for your super chat. We greatly appreciate that. And then my dude, John A1, says, thank you for your super chat. Johnny says, is it possible that Anthony Knapp was thrust into the left tackle position because of pure preference or favoritism from Joe Rudolph? I mean, preference, yes, because clearly Joe Rudolph thought that Anthony Knapp was the best option there. That's a preference. Someone who's a little bit maybe more athletic, a little twitchier athletically, has some length to him, even though he's not tall. Could it be favoritism? It could be, John, but I don't like going after coaches for things that I have no evidence of. And it could be true, but how do I prove that? You know what I mean? Like I can say, hey, that was a bad third down call because I can look at the down and distance, the situation. I can know what the personnel is on the other side of the team. I can know what the personnel is on your side of the team and say that's probably not the best call for your football team at that time. To say that a coach is playing a guy because of favoritism, it would just be a guess unless I'd heard something from a source, which I haven't. You know, so it could be, it's possible. Yes, it's definitely possible. But that's just a guess. And we haven't seen things from the practice field that would tell us otherwise about that. So I wish I had an answer for you, John, other than saying it's definitely possible. It's definitely possible in theory, but it's also possible that that's true at every position.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? We don't know if he's been outplayed by Tosh Baker, but they just like Knapp more. We don't know that Gerby's looking better in practice. They just like him more. We don't have any evidence of that. And just because he's playing not well doesn't mean that other players wouldn't play worse. You know what I mean? And that's what we don't know. So I'm going to avoid accusing Joe Rudolph of that until I actually have evidence of that. And I have not even gotten a whiff of that so far. And I usually get a whiff of different things going on like that. And, you know, that's kind of where I'm at on that one. So, yeah. So that's it, Trevor. So I'm going to be bringing my guy, Bill Bender, on here in a second, Trevor, but really good stuff today. You and I are going to be back tomorrow at 1:00. We're going to do a mailbag. So if you guys want to talk about it's whatever you all want to talk about, Notre Dame related, recruiting related, college football related, whatever you guys want to do. 1:00 tomorrow. Me and my man Trev are going to be doing our mailbag. during that show. And you guys sometimes in Mailbags, you get a little extra special treat. Ryan sometimes in the chat, people are asking him NFL draft questions, which is way smarter of asking him NFL draft questions in the show than asking us, because I'll tell you what a fan thinks, but thank you, but not what the other one thinks. So my wife just brought me a hot tea because she's very sweet like that. So we're ready to rock and roll. So Trevor, man, thank you for being with me today. Everybody on your way out, hit that like, hit that subscribe, hit the notification bell. See that scroller down there, boards.irishbreakdown.com. You need to check that out for all the cool stuff that we got going on. So thanks for being with us today on the Irish Breakdown Podcast. We're going to have Bill Bender on next, talking college football.